So Alien Romulus is it's an alien side story film, which takes place between the events of the original Alien and its sequel film, Aliens. Now, initially, I was a bit dismayed that that Ridley Scott never quite got to finish his own Alien trilogy of sorts with Prometheus and Alien Covenant. I know a lot of people had mixed feelings on those films just because like they didn't like that it was explaining a little bit too much of the lore. But I thought for Ridley Scott trying to like tinker with a little bit more of like the philosophical elements of Alien, those films are really compelling, and I was kind of let down by the fact that that the next Alien film was not going to go back to that, and it was just kind of gonna veer into familiar territory and just be like a fairly safe sequel that just references what a lot of Alien fans have come to expect with these films. Now, that being said, yes, Romulus does have a lot of those elements. It does feel like it's trying to tap into like what everybody remembers about Aliens, like a like a very nostalgic sequel in more than one ways. Like it does hint at like past events, and there is the very questionable CGI inclusion of one of the old characters, which is definitely the worst part of the film. But for going back to retreading on like the familiar ground that Alien has been on, I think it kind of works for like getting Alien a little bit back to its roots while still trying to like embrace like a little bit more of like the action and the horror aspect. So I guess like the good news is like if you never found yourself that into like Prometheus and Covenant, like you felt like it was a little like Scott was getting a little bit too buried in like his philosophical mindset, and you just kind of love the kind of like the gritty ragtag nature of like the past Alien films that was showcasing how like the Weyland-Yutani Corporation was corrupt and these people who were trying to strike back against that. Romulus gives you that. And I did like the fact that at least with the exception of like the CGI inclusion, this is a fresh batch of young and determined characters who we do get to spend enough time with. So like the premise of the film is that you have this group of miners who are on a planet trying to get off of it, and they realize there's no way they can escape from the Weyland-Yutani Corporation in the way that they're currently set up. So they need to find a way to get off planet, and the best way that they can do that is if they get in a ship and head off to this space station that's going to come in orbit soon and pilfer what they can from there to make their escape. And before they even get aboard, we do spend just enough time with the characters where we get to know and like them, kind of like we did in like the past Alien films. So you have Kaylee Spaney playing like the main character of Rain, who is, they establish is an orphan. She doesn't have much, she doesn't have many people she can gravitate towards, so she befriends an android called Andy, played by David Johnson. And I love the fact that like Andy is not a perfect android, like he malfunctions, like he's clearly not as intelligent as other androids, and he, like Rain constantly has to fix him. But Rain, she admires that, Andy still has this heart to him. So yeah, very, very likable character here. And then you have Tyler, who is Rain's ex-boyfriend, played by Archie Renault. And then like a few other characters, Kay, Bjorn, and Navarro, and they all have their own little like their quirks and their own recognizable characters and personalities and different beliefs, and how they joke and how they have fun and different things that they're fighting for. So you get to know enough about these characters, so they're not just simplistic space marines or just like very basic space like space truckers. It actually does the work of making you care for these characters, so that when the Xenomorphs start coming out, you care about whether or not they're going to survive. And once they get aboard this space station, which they thought was going to be a simple get in, get out, they soon realize that they have to find a way out as quickly as they can before the Xenomorphs kill them and the space station crashes and they're all blown to smithereens. Now, the film, in terms of like the allegories, like they're a little bit on the nose, but I mean, that's like it's on the nose in like the way that you feel would work for like an Alien film. Like I love the fact how Weyland Yutani's corporate greed is personified through Andy. Like at one point Andy like upgrades himself with the same android tech on the ship, and that of course makes him fight more for the company than for them for the people he's trying to protect. And this leads to, and I love how they stage Andy here too, because Andy is made to be so smart, but he makes like he makes tough calls that, you know, if you're completely detached from the film and you don't really care about the characters and you're only just focused on survival, and you say like, hey, these characters shouldn't do that, or they shouldn't do this, Andy is that person who makes those tough calls about, you know, locking people out when like there's Xenomorph in the room and not taking risks and, you know, trying to keep everyone safe. And it's kind of like shoved back at the audience, say, no, if you do this, it kind of does make you inhuman and shows that you don't really care about these people. And I love how, you know, it only takes like, you know, it takes like fighting back, you know, for these people to survive, and, you know, barely anyone makes it out alive. And for some people, I know like how it just kind of like keeps going here. Like by the third act, it just becomes like a straight up chase. Like a lot of like the deeper themes of contemplating, not just like the political and like the corporate angle, but also the sexual elements, which they are there. Like the psychosexual aspects of like, you know, the original like Giger's designs are kind of there. Like they're, like I said, with a little bit of the capitalism commentary, it's much more overt. Like at one point there's the egg sac that shoots out acid that melts someone's face. It's straight up a vagina. Like they put the extra detail in there to make it look like the vagina. And then of course when like the xenomorph emerges, it's highly phallic. That they do lean into that. And there are parts of it that do coincide with like the human beings. Like one of the characters they establish is pregnant. And I do love the way that they kind of like set it up, because like they don't tell you outright who the father is, but if you pay enough attention to like the visual language, you can tell who is the dad among this crew. And like you would think like, okay, like, you know, there's going to be some clashing with the xenomorphs and this pregnant woman and tapping deeper into this aspect of psychosexuality, and it kind of doesn't. Like it's still like those two elements still merge, but it almost kind of feels like out of necessity rather than exploring something deeper about like like the aliens representing like sexuality and like, you know, like fear of being like sexually assaulted, and, you know, highlighting on the womb. All that just kind of feels a little bit like surface level here. Mostly because, like I said, by the third act, it's just like straight up running and gunning, chasing, trying to escape the aliens, and aliens are gutting people, and it's gross and gruesome. So, and the thing is, enough of the effects I feel were really cool. And the soundtrack was perfect for making this setting where there are moments of terror and there are moments of wonder. And it just engrosses you where even though, yeah, it is a chase, I was in it. I was willing to see, you know, who's going to make it out by the end. And there were a few surprises here and there about which characters they fear are dead and which ones aren't, and which ones get cornered and which ones die in the most weird and horrific ways of like, you know, xenomorphs bursting out of their body. All that stuff is fun. And like, and I think just on like the atmosphere, I think Romulus works. And like I said, with the referencing of the previous films and the somewhat pointless like CGI inclusion of an old character are not needed. And many of those aspects, especially like when at one point they cite a familiar line from the past films, and it's just like moments like that really take you out of the film and realize, oh, why do you have to do this? Why can't you have enough faith to just go with this material that you've set up here and not just reference previous Alien films? Because that's a little bit of the infuriating thing. It's like, because most of the film does hold up well on its own without just drawing back on like previous references. You know, like the Jurassic Park movies had to constantly remind you of the original film. And Romulus doesn't do that as much, or at least I guess like the better way to describe that is that they do not inhibit the rest of the film. It's like, you know, and that's, I think that's like the biggest praise I can say for the film is that enough of the like more original aspects that work here with director Fede Alvarez is that he has like enough faith to not just make it a bunch of references. There are still references, but Alvarez, for like his previous work on like Evil Dead and Don't Breathe, he knows how to wield horror that keeps you watching and keep the horror like gory and gruesome right up to the very end. And I know like the ending is like a little bit like controversial as well. Maybe not quite so much Prometheus controversial, although it does very much have that Prometheus vibe by the end of that film for a multitude of reasons. But for just for like the way that the film is presented with like a lot of like the practical effects, it's obviously not all practical effects. There is some CGI here. I don't want to be one of those people who say, oh, thank God they didn't use CGI here, because they do. They all use CGI to some degree. But having some of the practical effects, like, with like some of the Xenomorphs and the weird creature at the end there, which part of you almost thinks that it is CGI, but then I later saw there's some practical effects shots with it. All that stuff is pretty cool to see. So I would say that, if you did get used to Ridley Scott's like Prometheus and Covenant tapping into deeper ideas, you're not going to get that with Romulus. That being said, if you do like Alien more for the effects and the gore, and just like the general presentation, I think you're going to like this film. It ultimately depends, I think, on how willing you are to forgive a bit of like the needless nostalgic references that they push in here, and just appreciate a lot of like the alien effects and the gore and the setting and the atmosphere. Because on that level alone, Alvarez gets this film right, and he does play to his strengths here that he had within his past horror films. I also like the fact that Alvarez's idea was a good one. Like, I think is like his initial concept was that he wanted to explore an alien film that explored it through like the eyes of younger people who have grown up in such an environment. Because there was one deleted scene you noticed where there were like some kids running by in one of the alien films, and he's kind of like, oh, what was it like for those kids to grow up in this environment? And I think that's a pretty cool angle to explore, because like for the first act at least, that kept me engaged immediately. Like, I wanted to see what these characters grew up in this environment, and that have essentially been left this horrible world that's been left for them by their parents, try to adjust to it. And I think that might resonate for a lot of younger audiences and a lot of like younger Alien fans. So I don't think Alien Romulus is on the same level as Alien or Aliens, or even for that matter, Prometheus and Covenant, mostly because I love those movies to death. But in terms of just like a fun alien film that still has its messaging on point, and it still has the psychosexual elements, and it's still a gory, action-filled mess, Romulus mostly delivers on a fairly fun... which sounds weird to say about a film where tons of people are dying and there's gruesome gore all over the place. But yeah, it is a fun horror film, which is, Alvarez playing to his strengths. So yeah, I kind of dug Alien Romulus.